Okay, welcome back to my primer on Stars Without Number. And it's about time we take a look at getting to those stars. And to do that, you've got to be in a starship. So, yeah, this is an important chapter in the book for most campaigns. This is going to be talking about what makes up a starship, the hull, the weaponry, the different departments of a starship, things like that. Modifications that can be done to a starship, and then we'll also be looking at traveling through space in a starship, and hopefully also space combat and evasion and stuff like that. So we are on page 93 currently. That's how far we've gotten in this book, which means we're not even a third of the way through the entire deluxe edition. Yeah, it's a big book, but there's a lot of fun stuff. Okay. So the in the default setting in most sectors, starships are not incredibly common, meaning that the average like 4-person family does not own a starship or something like that. I'd say it's probably around Firefly level ish. It's hard to exactly say as sectors can be a little different, and I'm not exactly certain how common ships are in the Firefly universe, but most people do not ever own a starship. They are very expensive. There's probably a healthy used market for starships. A lot of them are old and sort of held together. Getting a new starship built at like a ship dock or whatever is definitely an uncommon thing. Militaries, of course, have a healthy stock of starships, although most planets' militaries will only have like a dozen or two ships available to them. But there will also be navies, militaries that have, the biggest, baddest ships in the galaxy. So it depends on the planet, depends on the sector. It's hard to exactly pin it down, and the reason for that is it's open to the GM to exactly how common they want starships to be. So if you want them really common, where they're all over the place, space piracy is very common, things like that, you can have a sector that does that. If you want it to be a bit rarer, and for the players to get one and to fly around in one is a pretty special thing, you can do that. So, yeah, it's up to the GM, and maybe up to the players as well if you want to talk about it before you start. So, first off, for a starship, you have to talk about the hull. There are 4 hull classes. This is very important to learn because a lot of stuff is going to be based off this. You don't even really know about the hull types. The class of the hull is very important. There are 4 classes. Fighter is the smallest. These are your X-Wings and your Vipers from Battlestar Galactica. These are your basic one-man spaceship. Okay? These are generally used for planetary defense, or as like an accompaniment to a larger ship. These usually do not have like, I've been, I don't know if I've used it in this series, but I've been telling Ziggy about it. I've been using the term jump drive. But the term in this game is called spike drill. Just to be different, I suppose. But the spike drill is your warp drive, your jump drive. It's what you use to travel to different systems, star systems. So fighters usually will not have a spike drill because fighters generally have one person flying them, and spike drills, although they allow you to travel very far distances much faster than normal, it's still not fast. Normally it takes 6 days to travel from one sector to the next. And you have to be constantly alert during those 6 days because you're traveling through the meta dimension. And if you're not alert, you can sort of just get caught into this stream or something like that, and you can end up... Basically, you can end up in the middle of a star or much further away from your destination than you wanted, or your ship could... Something bad, really bad could happen. So you have to stay alert, otherwise something bad happens. So, it is possible to take drugs, to do it yourself, to stay awake that whole time. So... in a shitty situation, yes, one person can do a jump by themselves. But most of the time, it does not happen. And so most fighter class ships take out the spike drill. They don't have it. And they just have a regular engine. Next up in fighters, you have a frigate. This is your Serenity. This is your main picturesque mid-sized ship. The most common one is the Free Merchant. This is much beloved by adventurers. It has like a max crew of like 6 people by default. It's not a big combat vessel, and yeah, this is your sort of baseline ship. The Free Merchant is not a big combat vessel, but you can have frigates. You can build them to be more combat oriented. So don't let that dissuade you. The patrol boat and the corvette, these can be combat frigates. So these, a corvette, while still being a frigate, or even a heavy frigate, is frigate class, but it's sort of on the border between the frigate and the next one. It can incorporate 120 crew by default and costs 7 million credits. So it's a big thing. The heavy frigate is the heaviest starship that most poor or resource-deprived worlds can build. So even though the Free Merchant, which is the smallest frigate, let me go back a second. The Shuttle is actually a fighter class, even though it can incorporate 10 people. This is like a Raptor from Battlestar Galactica. It can take more than one person. It's not like an X-Wing, but it's a transport vehicle that's pretty damn cheap and pretty damn vulnerable. This has very little power. 3 power is practically nothing. 5 mass. This is not for really transporting a lot of goods or anything. This is just a really small little transport vessel, but it's still a fighter. Free Merchant is the smallest frigate, but it goes all the way up to the heavy frigate, which is, at least crew-wise, it's a lot bigger. So those are all frigate class. Then you have the cruiser. This is a step up from a frigate. So, like the fleet cruiser can take up to 200 crew by default. And this is definitely generally a combat-oriented vessel. It's got 15 armor, which is pretty solid, 60 HP, which is, as good as you're going to get at this point. And it's got 50 power. We're going to talk about power and mass and stuff in a little bit. But 50 power is quite a bit. If you look a little bit down here, you see that a carrier, which is a capital ship, also has 50 power. So a fleet cruiser is definitely a pretty big boy when compared to like a frigate. And a fleet cruiser is a favorite ship of the line of most wealthy advanced worlds, and often the biggest and most powerful ship most planets can build. So most of the time, this is the biggest ship that most people will see, including players. Because a step up from that is a capital ship. And this is not like the capital city of every planet will have one of these. Like, no, this is, there's only a handful of these in the entire sector, maybe. Capital ships are massive. The battleship, it makes you quiver. The battleship has 20 armor, 100 HP, and I should clarify, these numbers are not the same per se as the numbers for like the equipment and the weapons and stuff that we've been looking at, because starships cannot really be damaged by normal weaponry. So when we look at the weapons, you're going to see the damage looks very low, but basically all these numbers are crunched down because it's a whole different system. So let me just assure you that 20 armor and 100 HP is quite a bit. When the average attack will have like 15 armor piercing and maybe like 2d6 damage. Meaning the average attack from any given frigate won't even touch a battleship. You have to be very specifically designed to attack it in order to do damage to it. So yeah, this thing is just a monster. 75 power, 50 mass, 15 hard points. 15 hard points. It's crazy. It also costs 50 million credits, but never you mind that. Players are not ever going to own a battleship. I mean, maybe in a very special campaign, but that's pretty wild. A carrier is also capital ship, but it's not specifically designed for combat itself. It can certainly probably take out a lot of frigates by itself, but the special thing about a carrier is that it contains ship bays, which means that it can hold and support a number of smaller ships. I think the default carrier can carry 20 fighter class ships and 5 frigates, 5 corvettes nonetheless. So it's really meant to sort of sit in the back a little bit and launch out its fighters and its corvettes with maybe a couple fleet cruisers to support it as well. It is not the big, bad, beautiful, fucking badass that a battleship is. Then there's also the small station, large station. So these are a lot more commonplace. Almost every spacefaring world has at least one space station in orbit. Because you can see a small station only costs 5 million credits. And these are pretty useful for refueling and for civilian docking so people can dock at a small station before they actually go down to the planet. So they can go through like customs and all that kind of stuff. So they might be rejected before they go down to the planet. And they also function as trading hubs and all sorts of stuff like that. It's just a common thing for any planet that has space capabilities, especially one that's frequently visited, which is a lot of them, because trading is a big deal in a science fiction setting. So yeah, that's it. So really, what you mainly need to know are the 4 classes: fighters, frigates, cruisers, and capital ships. Because when we get into the fittings, the weapons, and the defenses, a lot of the information here is based on the class of the ship that you're installing it on. Some things can only be installed on a ship of a certain class or above. Like, you can't put a Drive 6 spike drill, the biggest spike drill possible, on a fighter. It just does not work. It does not work. So there's a bunch of things like that. You can't have a ship bay for a fighter on a fighter. All right? It's nonsensical. So those are extreme examples, but there's a bunch of examples of stuff you can't put on fighters or frigates or so on and so forth. And that also goes for defenses. So you can't put certain defenses, like a burst ECM generator, you can't put on a fighter. The weapons, definitely, there's a whole bunch you can't put on a fighter. Torpedo launchers, nuclear missile launchers, grav cannons, these things are restricted to certain classes and above. But when you get to modifications, we'll talk about how you can get around that a little bit, but I'm jumping ahead. Okay. So, fittings. These are different things these are basically anything that goes on a ship that is not a weapon or a defensive upgrade. So these are things like upgrading the spike drill, your jump drive. These are things like cargo space. So if you want part of your ship devoted to cargo space, this is sort of how you specify it. If you want to have a smuggler's hold on your ship, that's an option. If you want to have lifeboats, that's an option. Fuel scoops. So this can scoop fuel from a nearby star. All of this stuff. There's a lot of it, and it is awesome. I played a whole bunch of Elite Dangerous back in the day. Not back in the day, it was like a year or so ago, maybe 2 years ago. There's a bunch of stuff in this system that reminds me of Elite Dangerous. And I guess I don't know enough about that series and science fiction in general to know, like, who took what from what. But there's a lot of things in here that remind me of Elite Dangerous. And I think it's awesome. Like fuel scoops. I've never heard of that anywhere else other than Elite Dangerous. So I don't know if they took it from there, but it's cool. So, I'd love to just go over all of this, but there's a few key things that I guess I'll point out. So, amphibious operation. This allows you to take the ship underwater. This is only available to fighter and frigate classes, so you cannot take your battleship underwater. So yeah, they're, depending on your situation, this is not going to be like just a go-to upgrade. But you might want to take that. And I guess now is a good time for me to explain how upgrades work. For one, there's money. Yes, you need money. You need credits in order to upgrade. And you'll see this big table. There's a lot of numbers. So here you go, amphibious operation. The baseline cost is 25,000 credits. Remember when I said we'd get to some crazy credit amounts? Yeah, now you're looking at it. So, 25,000 credits. This allows you to equip your fighter with amphibious operations, so you can take your X-Wing underwater if you really want to. But you'll notice there's an asterisk next to it. What that means is that number is multiplied based on the class of the ship you're equipping it to. So, for a frigate, it's multiplied 10 times. Meaning, if you want your Serenity, your frigate class, to go underwater, this upgrade costs 250,000 credits. Yeah, so that's quite a bit. a brand new free merchant baseline frigate that most players are going to have costs 500,000 credits. So, yeah, that's expensive. Now, you can't do it for the amphibious operation, but I'll pretend you can. If you wanted to install it in a cruiser class, it would cost 25 times that number, which is a lot. And a capital ship is 100 times that number. So, say you wanted to have cold sleep pods. This keeps occupants in stasis. I think there's some special rules for that, probably. You can take it multiple times, and it depends on your crew number, but whatever. Just look at this. So, 5 times, or 5,000 credits for your fighter to have a cold sleep pod, if you really want. Oh, no, it's baseline frigate. So you see class frigate, so you can install this on a fighter. Bummer. But with a modification, you probably could. But anyways, so baseline frigate for your Serenity to have cold sleep pods, 50,000 credits. That's not horrific, but okay. For your cruiser class vehicle, Starship, to have cold sleep pods, it would cost 125,000, right? And for your capital ship, your battleship, to have cold sleep pods would cost 500,000 credits. I mean, when you're building a battleship, that's not that bad. But you look at the fucking Drive 6 upgrade. If you want your battleship to have the biggest, baddest drive available, that's 100 times 500,000, which is 500 million credits. Isn't it? Am I losing my mind? Maybe it's not. Let me look. 500,000 times 100 is 50 million. Okay, 50 million. Still, that's a lot of that's a lot, because your battleship cost 50 million. It's crazy. It's crazy. But it makes sense. These are some big ships. And to have a drive that can move that big of a ship through the meta dimension. And it's not just the bare minimum. This is the best of the best. That number, we'll see later, it changes how fast you travel. And Drive 6 is huge. That's super fast. It's nuts. Anyways. An important one that a lot of people are going to be looking at and a lot of ships are going to have is atmospheric configuration. By default, your spaceship cannot land on a planet. Cannot. Your X-Wing, by default, cannot land on a planet. I'm telling you, you need to have atmospheric configuration. So that's going to be important for a lot of people. Most frigates are going to have atmospheric configuration. Fighters, it depends on their purpose. If they're just part of a carrier, maybe not. But if they're like planetary defense, they're probably going to have it. Maybe not. They could just dock at the space station nearby, but most frigates are going to have this. So atmospheric configuration for a frigate costs 50,000 credits. If you're building it new, that's just something you have to keep in mind. Most frigates you find or used or whatever, they're probably going to have it already. Because they're probably going to be landed on a planet, so. It's not really explained what happens if you try to land a ship without that. I think Kevin, the author, explained it as like, what that actually is like gravitational dampeners. So they like without that, when you try to land, like gravity just fucks you up and you just crash. So I mean, obviously you can land on a planet without it, but it's not going to be healthy. So yeah, for most people you're going to want that. So 50,000 credit. for a frigate. You see it costs 0 power. And so you'll see some of these have power. And if we go back up here, you see that each ship has a maximum amount of power available to it. So for your free merchant, that is 10 power. Pretty simple. So to have the cold sleep pods on your frigate would take up 1 of your power. And it's not, I don't think it's really, I don't think you can like turn off systems in order to like, I don't know, maybe. That might be up to like a GM. I don't know if there's rules for that. Like you can't install things, well, by the rules, it does not say whether or not you can install things that exceed your maximum power and just have certain things like turned on at certain times so that you never actually exceed your power. That's something you can do in Elite Dangerous, I know, which I always thought was pretty sweet. You can deck out your ship so that there's things that exceed your total power output, but it like turns off any systems that go over that. And so you can have certain things active at certain times whenever you need them. Because you don't need everything. You don't need cold sleep pods active all the time. But I don't know. Maybe if they're not constantly powered, they explode. I don't know. If I was the GM, I'd say, you know, sure, if you have the money and you're prepared to balance your power situation, sure. Cold sleep pods would be something where you're like, yeah, most of the time you wouldn't need it to be powered, but it's like, well, when I do need it to be powered, and I'm playing fast and loose with my power generator, when I'm stuck in cold stasis, I don't know. But if I was a GM, I'd probably allow it to be built. I mean, I'm sure I'd have like an engineer come up to them and be like, oh, you know, there's some problems with your plans here. And like, just do it. I don't know. Moving on. What are we at? Okay. Auto targeting system allows you to it's pretty useful. We'll get to ship combat later, hopefully. But basically, each weapon on your ship, if it needs to be fired, it has to be manned. Every weapon. And with limited player characters, not every gun might be manned at the same time. So you can get an auto targeting system that's basically, you just tell it what to shoot at, and it will get to fire with a +2 without human assistance. So that's pretty nice. Costs 50k, but pretty nice. It might be better to just hire some asshole that needs a job and just pay him like 50 credits a day to fire the gun. But, you know, if you want to be cool. Automation support is a similar thing. You can hire robots, or you can build robots and stuff to work your ship for you. Cost money, but they don't need pay and they don't take up life support. So there are pros and cons. Boarding tubes, pretty cool. These are armored tubes that you like shoot out at another ship, and it allows you to just go into the tubes and board the ship that way, because it breaks right through their hull. And if you want to board without those, you have to go through their airlock or cut through their hull yourself, which is slower and trickier. And if you're planning on doing a bunch of boarding, get boarding tubes, definitely. What else? Cargo space. So by default, a ship has no cargo space. None. Which is sort of weird to think about, but yeah, you have to designate space as cargo space. Because it's pressurized and I don't know. So this is where we get to mass. This is the other column. So each ship has a number of mass. So again, for free merchant, you have 15 mass. So you look at cargo space. It doesn't cost anything because you're just converting space. But 1 mass, and you can take this as many times as you want. So, a bunch of things take up mass, weapons, defenses, fittings. But you'll have mass left over, and you'll probably convert it to cargo space. And so, 1 point of mass on a frigate counts as 20 tons of cargo space. So you spend 3 mass of your 15 and convert it to cargo space, you can carry 60 tons of cargo. So it's pretty useful. I mean, I figure most free merchants are going to have cargo space, at least, 40 tons. Because you never know what you might find, what you need to hold on to, and stuff like that. You don't want to be caught with cargo and no place to put it. So it's going to be available. And this ramps up depending on the size of the ship. This is also a good time to talk about this hash symbol next to the power and mass. So this is another multiplier based on hull class, but this is for power and mass. So the multiplier is a little different. It's multiplied by 2 for frigates, 3 for cruisers, 4 for capital ships. So this Drive 6 upgrade, not only does it cost 50 million for a capital ship, but it also costs 3 times 4 power for a capital ship. So this would really cost 12 power, which is quite a bit. And it would also take up 4 times 4 mass, which is 16 mass, which is a lot. So not only are you spending 50 million for your Drive 6 upgrade for your $50 million battleship, you're also taking up 16 points of your 50 mass just for your drive. It's crazy. This would almost never occur, but who knows. So yeah, that's what the hashtag means. It's multiplier, and these are all base numbers. So even if something is not available to a lower class, you still multiply it based on the lowest number. So it all multiplies up. Yeah. Anyways, blah, blah, blah. Colony core. This is expensive, I thought. It's 100k baseline. So for a frigate, it costs $1 million. Yeah. So a frigate costs $1 million to become a colony core. And this is designed to become a settlement. So you land the ship somewhere, or it becomes an orbital installation, and you press a button and the ship is no longer usable. It is no longer a ship. It is nothing. It becomes a settlement. So it expands out into housing facilities, gardens, living fusion plants, workshops. It becomes a settlement. Whether it's a planetary one or a orbital one. So that's cool. That's not something players are going to buy too often, but sure. What else? Drive upgrades, about that. Drop pods. These allow you to drop passengers or troops from orbit onto a planet or something like that. They are stealth versions. They're stealthy. Emission dampers. So these make your ship stealthy by masking energy emissions. Again, that's something that doesn't need to always be active, because there are plenty of times you don't want to be stealthy, because that draws attention if you're caught. So again, you could turn those off most of the time. Exodus Bay. These are cold sleep pods, but these are massive numbers of them. So this is specifically designed for cruisers or capital ships. You cannot put these on frigates. Very expensive, but these can house potentially millions of people. Because by default, like a capital ship with one of these upgrades can take 5,000. But you can take the upgrade multiple times to double those numbers. So yes, these can house millions of people. These are specifically designed for moving an entire population of people off planet. That's what they're designed for. that, again, it's just not something most campaigns are going to involve as far as players are concerned, but it's there and it's cool. What else? Med bays, fuel bunkers, hydroponic production, lifeboats. Most of this stuff is not too interesting. Mobile extractor if you want to do some mining. The players could just mine ore from asteroids and sell it. Or they could set up a mobile factory inside their ship and mine ore and then refine it and make stuff if they want to play like RimWorld or something. Or Factorio or whatever that game is. Precognitive nav chamber. If you have a precog on the ship, they can use this chamber to facilitate jumps, to make jumps more reliable, which is cool. Psionic anchor point. Both of these things are really like, these are pre-tech. These are not commonly available. The anchor point, a Scion can like attune themselves to it, and then they can sense and affect any object or location within 10 meters of the relic. So they can use their psionic abilities from far away, as long as they're in the same solar system. You know, a teleporter could always teleport back to it, so that's pretty cool. Sensor mask, you can spoof or disguise or whatever your ID tags and hull type. That could be useful. Ship bay, like I said, you can hold other ships if you're a big ship. Ship tender mount. This allows you to take a smaller ship and have it like attached to you, so that when you jump, it goes with you. This is available even to frigates, I believe. Yeah, it's available to frigates. So you could have a fighter latch on and jump with you. So technically you could have a fighter sort of with your frigate, but it's not ideal. Because it just... there's not a huge amount of point to it. Because it takes an hour to remove the ship from the mount. So it's not like you're gonna, launch all fighters. It's not gonna in an emergency. Or you can dismount instantly, but it breaks the mounting. It's just like, it's really not meant for that. So I don't know. Survey sensor array. So every ship has a sensor array that can scan a system or a planet or something like that to look for other stuff, navigational hazards, and it can find refueling stations and blah blah blah. But you can get a super sensor array that can find little details, and I think it said somewhere that you can use it to like read newspaper print or something like that on a planet, which is pretty cool. Tractor beams, of course. You can pull in smaller objects, smaller ships, stuff like that. System drive. So this is stuff a lot of fighters will do. They will remove the spike drive and they will put in a system drive. So it functions normally within a system, within a solar system, but you can't make jumps, you can't warp or anything. But it lowers the cost of the basic hull by 10%, and it adds extra power and mass. So they get an extra 1 power and 1 mass. Or 2 mass. So 1 power and 2 mass for a fighter, which is a pretty big deal if I go all the way back. For a strike fighter, they only have 2 mass to begin with, so doubling that by swapping out their spike drive, which most of the time they won't use anyways because they don't want to stay awake for 6 days to try and jump. So, yeah. Moving on. Defenses. There aren't that many. There's a few that are going to be really useful. What else? Augmented plating. This is available to every class of ship. You gain a +2 bonus to AC. That's just as good for like as if it were for a character. +2 bonus is just as good. So it's pretty nice. But it does decrease your speed by 1, which for some ships, that's not great. That's not great. So it's a somewhat cheap option available to everybody, but it's got its downside. Boarding countermeasures, so hardened bulkheads, reinforced hatches, and specially designed automated kill corridors. So if you're worried about being boarded ever, yeah, you can get some boarding countermeasures to just slaughter people as they come aboard. Burst ECM generator. This one is on a lot of ships. This is frigate and above. It allows you to negate 1 successful hit per engagement, which is really good, because if you're being chased, 1 hit could easily make the difference between you getting away or you exploding. So that's going to be on a lot of ships. The hardened polyceramic overlay is available to every class. It decreases the armor-piercing quality of any hit by 5. Again, that's really good, because that could easily make a big difference in whether or not another ship can actually hurt you. If their weapon just bounces off you or not. Because either a weapon gets through or it doesn't. So that's also going to be pretty common, because it's fairly cheap and available to everybody. Planetary defense array. This upgrades your nuke snuffer field and your gravitic breaker guns. So this can dampen meteor impacts, dropped penetrator rods, or other non-powered bombardment techniques. And it increases your nuke snuffer field. But it doesn't really talk about the degree to which it functions. Yeah, it's probably a matter of like, if the enemy has anything remotely resembling planetary bombardment capabilities and they try to use it on you, if you have that equipped, it's just going to be nullified. Whereas if you don't have that, it's going to do something. I mean, I don't think a GM would just have some guys fire some nukes at you and you blow up, but it might affect you in some ways. But I looked all over this book. The details are pretty slim on the whole nuke snuffer fields and breaker guns and stuff like that. Alright, so guns, weapons for your ship. There's some badass stuff in here. So this one is easily arranged based on hull class. So the ones available to fighters are pretty basic stuff here. Multifocal lasers. So basically, it's a lot like ground-based weapons. You have either lasers or projectiles. It's just sort of the source and the details of what they do. To speed things up, I'm not going to go through each one here. We're just going to kind of look at their stats. So the basic multifocal laser, 100K for the fighter. These numbers are not multiplied. I don't think. I thought there might have been one. Maybe not. Maybe not multiplied. No, I guess they're not multiplied, which makes some sense. So anyways, multifocal laser, it does 1d4 damage. So it is like the dagger of starship weapons. That's not much. It's not much 1d4 damage. You're not going to be taking down cruisers or anything like that. But recall that another fighter, a fighter only has 8 HP. So fighter v fighter could easily destroy one another in a couple rounds. Even a free merchant, the main ship that most people are going to have, has 20 HP. Which, yeah, 1d4 could take a long time, and that's not perfectly ideal, but you get 3 fighters all shooting their lasers at it, it's going to cause trouble. But that's the basic weapon. You'll see it has 20 AP, so that's armor piercing. So it can pierce through 20 armor. Meaning it deducts 20 from a ship's armor. Which again, if we go here, only a couple ships have 20 armor by default. You can take some defenses and stuff to increase that, but the free merchant by default has 2 armor. So yeah, you really don't even need 20 AP, but yeah, it's really good for getting into ships. That can get even into a battleship by default. The Reaper battery. This is 3d4 damage, which is pretty good. But it is clumsy, meaning that it's -4. It takes a -4 to hit fighter class. So that is not something you're going to use in a dogfight, because you're going to be rolling -4 to your hit rolls just to hit another fighter. Maybe it's worth it if you're a really good pilot, because it does triple the damage of your laser, but chances are you're going to be using something like the Sand Thrower or the Fractal Impact Charge. The Fractal Impact Charge, 2d6 damage, AP 15, which is really good, but it uses ammunition. So it has 4 ammo by default, meaning this mass number, with that mass number, so by committing one of your ship's mass, you get the weapon, the Fractal Impact Charge, and you get ammunition space for 1 magazine, pretty much. You get the 4 ammo space. You can increase that, so you can go to 2 mass, and then you get to double your ammo capacity, so it can hold 8 ammo on your ship. Now, in a simple dogfight, you might not use 8 ammo. But say you're in like a huge big battle where you're going to be, going up against, you're out there for like 8 hours. You're going to be using more than 8 ammo. So you might have to rely on a worse weapon or something like that. But you also have to keep in mind the power costs and stuff of all this. Looking at a fighter, they only have 5 power. That weapon takes 5 power. There are mods you can do to sort of reduce that number and increase your power and stuff like that, but by default, you're going to have like 1 weapon on your fighter. And having only like 4... They have 2 mass, so maybe you'll have 8 ammo with nothing else. You'll have this Fractal Impact Charge with 8 ammo, and that's your only weapon. Once that's done, you're done. So yeah, on paper it looks a lot better than, say, the multifocal laser, but there is a dependability to the laser. So I really like how everything's balanced here. It's really nice. Building a ship seems very, very fun. The Polyspectral MES beam. It is better than a lot of things for a fighter, but it costs 2 million credits, and it's tech level 5. So you're not going to have this. Quit looking at it. Finally, the Sand Thrower. This is like a shotgun for spaceships. 2d4 damage, 1 mass, 1 power, or 3 power, and it has flak, which means you roll double for hit rolls and damage rolls against fighters, and you take the better result. So this is designed to take out fighters. So if you're purely interested in dogfighting with this fighter, you're taking a Sand Thrower, and that's pretty much the end of it. Moving on to frigates, Flak Emitter Battery. This is similar to a Sand Thrower, except it has 10 armor piercing and slightly better damage, but it costs 10 times as much, takes more power, and triple the mass. So if you're really concerned about taking on armored fighters for some reason, or if you want a little flexibility, you might take a Flak Emitter Battery, but a lot of places, a lot of ships are just going to have a Sand Thrower and maybe like a torpedo launcher. Torpedo launcher costs 500,000 to build, 10 power, which is insane for a frigate. Again, this is sort of the balancing act. You can build a ship with very minimal weapons, and you have a lot of power and mass for cargo space and crew space and, other fittings. Maybe defensive measures, evasive measures, things like that. You can build it as just a non-combatant thing. Or you can just invest it all into, I'm going to fuck shit up with my frigate, and you go for torpedo launchers and stuff like that. 10 power is a big thing, and 3 mass, because a free merchant only has 10 power and 15 mass. So most free merchants, without heavy modifications, are not going to have a torpedo launcher. But a heavy frigate might have a torpedo launcher, because that's 25 power. So, if I was looking for something that was going to kill things, I probably wouldn't buy a free merchant, if possible. But again, it's the price difference and availability. Free merchants are 500,000 credits, which isn't chump change. But the next step up is 2.5 million. Free merchants are going to be all over the place, relatively, compared to every other ship of that weight class. So, yeah. Though you may want a torpedo launcher on your free merchant, it's hard to say if you'll actually get it. But again, mods could save the day. So if you do get a torpedo launcher, each set of 4 torpedoes cost 2.5k, does 3d8 damage and 20 armor piercing. It's very good. It's very good. Limited ammunition, but very good. Charged particle caster, 800,000. 3d6 damage, 15 armor piercing, and it's clumsy, which means it's not great at hitting fighters. But against other frigates, in an extended battle where ammunition is a concern, charged particle caster is very good. Plasma beam, pretty similar. Half the power draw, costs less, a little bit more mass, and less armor piercing, but it's perfectly fine at taking out fighters. Haha. Mag Spike Array costs $1 million. Ho-ho. That is double the cost of the ship if you're flying a free merchant. But, hey, maybe you're rolling in it and you got a free merchant. I don't know. 2d6 plus 2 damage, that's very solid. It's got flak, so you're going to rip apart fighters. 10 armor piercing, it's very solid, but it is ammunition based. Ammo 5. It's certainly nothing to sneeze at. Is that the saying? I don't know. It's not bad. It's not bad at all, but the cost is pretty prohibitive. Nuclear missiles, $50,000 to install the system. $5,000 for 5 nuclear missiles. Damn, they're cheap. That's because they're so obsolete. Everybody has nuke snuffers. So the damage is special. It basically says that it can level a city pretty easily. But it's just a matter of being able to use them. If I want to destroy some barbarian tribe, yes, I will purchase nuclear missiles and fuck them up. But otherwise, yeah, it's not going to be found on most ships. It's just not that useful. Getting up to the cruiser. Cruiser and above, this is where you get really ridiculous. These weapons start costing millions each. 3d10 damage, 46 damage, a lot of armor piercing on practically everything. Smart Cloud has the cloud quality, which means that you use it, it hits every fighter ship that attacked you the previous round. So, not automatically, you have to roll, but it has the potential to wipe out an entire fleet of fighters. So, it's expensive as shit, but yeah, it's very powerful. Yeah, getting up to the capital ships that cost 5 million each. They start doing D20 amounts of damage, 20 armor piercing. It's pretty absurd. You know, capital ships just shred things if they're designed for it. The Singularity Gun, tech level 5, 25 armor piercing. That nothing can stop that. Nothing can stop that. 5 D20 damage, which means it has the potential to destroy a battleship in a single shot. It's insane. If this, you know, there's going to be one of these in the entire campaign, and God help you if you're on the other side of it. So that's fun. Then they give example starships for all the different hull types. So these are just basic stats and weapons and upgrades. So if you just need, I need a fighter, I just need to throw a fighter at them, this is the fighter you throw at them. You know, it's got a basic weapon, fittings, cost, all this sort of stuff. But it's really easy to just swap out the weapon for something else. You know, for an NPC thing, I probably wouldn't look too much at the power numbers or anything like that, as long as I was picking a fighter weapon. Because I think there's a Reaper battery. Yeah, it could accommodate any of these weapons. If I just wanted to swap it, oh, this one's got a MES beam. Well, that would be a little cruel. This one's got a fractal impact charge. So yeah, there's basic stats for everything. Nothing really specific I need to go over. And it talks about more descriptions of every ship as well. That beautiful, beautiful battleship. My God. It's incredible. Oh. Yeah. Okay, last thing real quick is ship mods. So you can, I'm pretty sure you can have mods built into the ship when it's constructed. But again, most of the time, you're not going to have a new ship constructed. You're going to be working with the old used ship. I just think most campaigns work that way. Because maybe down the line, if you play a campaign long enough, you might get enough favors or get enough funds that you can construct a new ship with millions of credits. But most of the time, I think campaigns are going to consist of you discovering or finding or earning or stealing a ship of some type, and then using that for most of the campaign. So mods are often then added on after the fact, and they require money, and sometimes they require pre-tech parts, certain components that you have to find or buy or whatever. And they require an engineer. And the engineer has to maintain the mods. An engineer can maintain a number of mods at once equal to their maintenance score. And if it's neglected for 1 week of active use, it breaks down. So you can't fill your ship with 30 mods unless you have a lot of engineers and a lot of money, I guess. Because more than one engineer can work to maintain a ship's modifications, provided the maintenance officer has a fixed skill score as high as that needed to install the mod in the first place. So yeah, someone can oversee it with multiple engineers, but again, for most campaigns, you're not getting into that territory, I think. But yeah, the mods are cool. These are just a bunch of sample mods. You can come up with your own, just like weapon mods and stuff. So let's see here. So drill velocity upgrade. So you can basically upgrade your spike drive for a lot cheaper than actually upgrading it by sort of overclocking it. And the cost of these mods is based on a percentage of your overall hull cost. The base cost. So the free merchant, which costs 500,000 credits base, the 10% of that is 50,000 credits. So that's the number that costs to install this upgrade. 50,000 credits, one component per hull class. So again, it's that same 4-step system. So it would be 2 components for a freighter or for a frigate, and the person installing it has to have fixed 2. as well as maintaining it. So there you go. This one is probably my favorite though. I just fucking loved it. I gotta read this one to you. Emergency drill activation. The ship can engage its spike drives even when in dangerous proximity to a planetary body. When engaged, it can drill out in a single round. Doing so increases the difficulty of any spike drive skill check by +2 if in system, or +4 if actually landed. Drilling out from the surface will destroy everything within 200 meters of the ship. The mod can be used only once every 4 weeks. So there's some stuff in there you don't really understand yet, but so normally, by default, you can only use your spike drill, your jump drive, when you're on the edge of a solar system. Because it's based on, like, gravitational pull of a star and on a transition zone and stuff like that. So it's all based around the edge of a solar system and like the outer rim. So this is absurd because it allows you to jump from a planet's surface. By itself, that's very cool. But the fact that you destroy everything within 200 meters of the ship is amazing. Just amazing. Because that's like a perfect fuck you to a planet. You're just like, I'm done with this city. Bring the ship down and we'll jump out of here. And you just leave a giant crater in the middle of their city. There's probably planetary defenses designed to prevent that, but you could do something similar. It's just awesome. I'm curious if you jump like next to a ship. I don't know if there's any effects based on that. There's a scene in Battlestar Galactica where someone jumps, like, while sort of still inside the ship, inside of Galactica, and it causes some problems. So I don't know exactly how it works. I might have to look further into that. So yeah, some mods can increase the ship's speed or require that you no longer need fuel. This allows you to lose points of power in order to gain mass. This allows you to... you can gain weapon mounting. You can gain weapons that normally require a larger ship, a larger hull class. And you can take them out. So it allows a frigate to take on a, let me see here, a smart cloud. So you can have that sweet, badass smart cloud. If you have enough money and you really love your frigate instead of just building a cruiser or something. But it's probably cheaper. So you can do stuff like that. But then you can also do, here, specialized mounting. Chosen fitting requires only half the normal power and mass per fitting installation. So you can take fittings or weapons, and they only require half the power and mass. So that allows you to slam more stuff into your ship. But keeping in mind, you can't add extra hard points. So you can only have a certain number of weapons on your ship. But still, it's pretty good. That's a pretty good one. Cost 10% of your hull, no components, fix 1. I think a lot of ships will probably have something like that. You can have more armor, you can conceal stuff, all sorts of fun mods. Pretty much anything you could think of is probably possible. Okay, I think we'll leave it off here. We didn't quite finish up spaceships. I'm sorry. I told you this was going to be a long series. We're at page 110. We're finally a third of the way through the book. So next time we'll talk about ship combat and stuff like that, and space travel. That probably won't take up the whole video, I hope. After that, I think we'll probably skim through a lot of the rest. Just because there's so much, and by that point we'll really have covered most important things that need to be said. So, whew. My name is Mang. This has been the primer for Stars Without Number. I'll see you fine folks in the next part.